All right, welcome back to another episode of the Investigating Pathways podcast. Today I'm joined by Nihal Mehta, who has founded a host of companies and VC firms, including Urbangroove Networks, ipsh, India Internet Group, and ENIAC Ventures. Nihal, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. So really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about your origin story. So could you tell me pretty briefly a little bit about your life as a kid and sort of your time in college?
Sure. What do you want first?
Really sort of what got you into the world of entrepreneurship, any interesting experiences you might have had, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so we can talk for hours. Do you have a time limit?
No, I mean, go for it.
No, I'll keep this brief. I mean, I was lucky to grow up in a household of entrepreneurs. My folks immigrated to the United States from India in the early 70s. And they came over. My dad actually got his master's in engineering in Wisconsin at Marquette. My mom ended up getting her CPA in Iowa. I was born and raised in Iowa, believe it or not. And I was probably about 9 or 10 years old when I realized that the ping pong table downstairs was becoming harder and harder to play ping pong because there were lots of files and papers all over the table, and then all of a sudden my mom started spending more time at home, and then my dad started spending more time at home, and it turned out that they were starting a business, and they still have that business today. They basically import home goods from places like India and sell them to retailers like Walmart.
Gotcha.
And I kind of witnessed that from my own eyes, and I think the most inspiring thing was seeing that, at home, being able to have more flexibility with their kids, but also having their life filled with kind of purpose and not, working for somebody else, but in control of their own destiny. And every, additional deal that they closed was something that they would benefit from and not somebody else. And you could see that kind of spark and drive and sense of purpose. And I think that was pretty inspirational to me as a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, but I think that was the foundation for it, as a very young kid. So anyway, yeah, that's maybe the first spark of inspiration of entrepreneurship for me.
Awesome. So now sort of along those lines, let's get into sort of the first foray you had into entrepreneurship with Urbangroove. So can you tell me why, despite not thinking you were going to be an entrepreneur, you decided to sort of take the leap and become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I went to college in Philly at Penn. My roommate and I, senior year, were actually DJs. And we're playing all over the city, including on campus. And we would basically, email or text our friends where we were playing. And we decided to just create a website just so we wouldn't be bothered to have to update people all the time. Mm-hmm. And the year was 1998 and 1999. And so, this thing called the .com was really starting to gain traction. And so we started a website called phillytonight.com. Ended up actually being both of our senior theses. I majored in philosophy and computer science.
Yep.
And my co-founder was in the college at Penn. And so anyway, that's why we did it, just to really have a more efficient platform for notifying folks of what was going on. Turned out that, it was a pretty hot thing to have a .com in 1999, and so we were able to raise some capital pretty quickly, cobbled together almost $1 million from a lot of Indian uncles and aunties, a lot of 10K hustle checks, that was the first startup essentially that I built, and that was probably the best experience of my life. We built that company. We ended up almost 50 employees. We had a really nice office in Old City, Philadelphia. We had billboards on I-95. We had commercials on MTV featuring the Roots. It was a very strong brand.
Yep.
We had very little revenue, on the flip side. And when we ran out of money in 2001, we had a lot of debt on our balance sheet, and startups couldn't raise capital in 2001. The bubble had burst.
Yep.
And then 9/11 happened, obviously, and there was a pretty big downward inflection point in the entire market, not just the dot-com market. And so we were forced to do something, unthinkable to Indian entrepreneurs, especially high-flying as we were at that time. We had to file for bankruptcy because of the debt on our balance sheet. And so that was an incredibly humbling experience, before we were the talk of the town. And then now at the Diwali party, you have aunties in the corner saying, those kids filed for bankruptcy. And so anyway, that was a rough time. That year, 2001, was really rough. My co-founder and business partner, BJ, went home to his parents in Weirton. I actually bought back the assets, like on a fire sale, and moved to San Francisco to start my next company, ipsh, leveraging some of those assets. We ended up moving those investors over from Philly Tonight and Urbangroove into ipsh because we used some of the same IP. They actually ended up not only writing off that investment in 2001, but then ipsh was very successful. We were acquired 4 years later, 2005, but they ended up making money on that sale. So anyway, that was an incredible experience because it took a company up, took a company down, faced failure in the eye, which was bankruptcy, which is like the ultimate failure as a businessman. Got back up from that, dusted yourself off, built a more interesting business, bootstrapped it, focused on revenue, and then ended up, being acquired by a very large public company, Fortune 500 public company in New York called Omnicom. And, that was my first win as an entrepreneur. So kind of first loss, first win. But that first failure was so epic, and what I tell every entrepreneur is, fail fast, ideally not on our dime, not after we invest, like before we invest, but fail fast. You learn so much from your failures. And if you can kind of ship and fail fast, you'll iterate, and subconsciously you'll have that muscle memory. You'll be able to see around corners with that scar tissue, and it's so impactful.
Gotcha. So really quick, playing off of that, you sort of mentioned some things that you might have changed while building ipsh. And so talking about ipsh as well as the next company you built, Buzz, can you sort of walk me through how you applied learning lessons from sort of your previous startups like Urbangroove to each of these companies, and how did that sort of impact the way you built and ran the companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the big pivot from Urbangroove to ipsh was from B2C to B2B. And I think at that time, 2001 was pre-Google. Google was very young, but there was no real online ad network to help you monetize ads for B2C. Yeah. And so I think, I remember one of my mentors and bosses at Omnicom always said, fish where the fish are. I think, focusing on a business model that actually exists today, like you can actually generate revenue if you have to, is really important, And when we had the B2C, there wasn't a semblance of a really scalable, business model that could support that. Now, today there is, right? Today, like, obviously Facebook and Google take the lion's share of ad revenue. But like, if you start a successful B2C, Snapchat, right, rebuffed a, $2 billion acquisition offer from Facebook, and now they're worth over $100 billion. You have TikTok, you have Pinterest. I mean, these are massive companies, consumer companies that have been able to, Twitter, that have been able to show that you can create a very large B2C business from ad revenue, and you don't have to be Facebook and Google. So I think that was one learning very early on. And the other learning is, like, don't hire way ahead of revenue. I mean, obviously our first company, we hired a ton of people before we made $1. And I think, being able to anticipate, cash flow needs either through receivables or through, financing, so that you can always kind of, make sure you're ahead of the puck, is incredibly important. So anyway, learned so many things along the way, but those are two things that, jumped out.
Gotcha. So the last one of your sort of major companies I want to talk a little bit more about before we get into your time in venture is Buzzed, right? So Can you walk me through sort of what got you going back into building a company right after a successful exit? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked to, once they've got an exit, they sort of move on to venture, take a few years off, right? But you just got right back into it. And so how did that experience sort of go for you?
Yeah. Well, after ipsh, I think I realized that I am unemployable, that founders like me work 100 hours a week to not work 40 hours a week. And so, I had to leave Omnicom and start something new. And I think, I wanted to do it again. And this time I want to do it with venture. I hadn't raised venture in that journey, Phillies Night, Urbangroove, and ipsh.
Yeah.
And so in 2008, we ended up raising venture capital for a new startup called Buzzed, which is basically Affiliate Tonight, but on mobile. It was the same problem that we had, 10 years earlier, which was, and by the way, it's still not solved, arguably. I think it'd be a great business today. What's going on around me? Even last night in New York City during Halloween, I wish I had, this was Buzzed in 2008, you literally had a heat map on your phone showing you where people were by virtue of them just publicly posting to social networks. So, today it would be based on a lot of Instagram data, probably, and Twitter, and Pinterest, and TikTok, but probably mostly Instagram, I would imagine. Yeah. Where, you could literally look at the city and just see where the majority of, recent posts are coming from. And, those areas are kind of light up. So, imagine, and then you could click on a bar, a club, a restaurant, a theater, and kind of click on a particular location, actually see all of the specific posts, coming from it inside in real time. So, literally being able to look inside. So anyway, that was the vision of Buzzed, your city real time is the tagline. And the lesson that we didn't learn back in 99, don't launch a business without a business model. Mobile ad networks in 2008 were very nascent. Google was around, but there weren't any of these massive networks. There's a company called AdMob that I was lucky to be an angel investor. Mm-hmm. Actually, the first angel investor in 2005. After I sold ipsh, I met this kid that was dropping out of Wharton, and he read that I had started this company and sold it to Omnicom, and he wanted my advice, and gave him some time, and he offered for me to invest in his round. I never had written a check before, but I did. And obviously that company grew up and was acquired by Google. And it was an incredible investment and incredible company. But at that time, 2008, 2007, the mobile ad ecosystem was not yet mature. So anyway, we launched this service, got all these users. We got BlackBerry to invest in us. We're BlackBerry's first investment. BlackBerry was the talk of the town then. This is the iPhone. Yep. We're above Facebook, literally in the BlackBerry App Store.
Oh, wow.
And we weren't able to monetize, there wasn't a semblance of kind of the Spotify business model back then. People would not, you could not ask consumers to pay. And there weren't really very large ad networks. You had kind of third screen media that was acquired by AOL. You had millennial media that eventually went public. And then AdMob that was acquired by Google. But nothing was really, en masse back then. So,
gotcha.
In any case, we ran out of money, raised $4 million in venture. We went through that in 3 years. In 2010, we were looking to pivot. And actually, I took a lesson from my first journey from B2C to B2B. Yep. And we ended up also Buzz being B2C, pivoting to B2B. This time I didn't have to file for bankruptcy. This time I just, recapped the cap table and flipped the business model to essentially an ad network that leveraged social data for better targeting. That was called local response. And so what we did at local response is, we realized people were tweeting and are posting publicly more than ever. And if you were to tweet, I went for a run, the next time you jump on CNN on your phone, you might see an ad for Nike. And we would provide that social layer of targeting data to the ad networks and become an ad network ourselves. And so that company, we grew up to 10 million ARR, raised another kind of 10 million in venture, and that was eventually acquired. But that was high level. That's the journey from Philippe and I to Urbangroove to ipsh, bankrupt to ipsh, then buzzed, failed to local response. And so, interestingly enough, all the B2C businesses that I built failed. The B2B businesses were more successful. And yet I'm investing across both B2C and B2B. So I don't know what that says, but that was the entrepreneurial journey. I mean, that's from 1998 to essentially 2013 when I left local response.
Gotcha. Cool. So now I sort of want to move over to your time in venture and ENIAC, right? So to start off with, I'm curious, what got you to switch over from the world of entrepreneurship to supporting entrepreneurs as a venture capitalist?
Yeah, so, I mentioned my first angel investment in 2005 was AdMob, and I got to be inspired by two incredible investors, Rich Wong at Excel and Jim Getz at Sequoia, really grow that company up. And what I mean by grow it up is, not kick out the founder, but level up the founder. All of a sudden, the VP of sales came from YouTube, Tony Nethercutt. All of a sudden, the CTO, Kevin Scott, is now the CTO of Microsoft.
Yeah.
This incredible talent that they put around Omar, the founder CEO. Then of course all the corp dev at Apple and ultimately Google was also, a quick text message from, these investors. And so just being inspired by the power of real venture capital, right? What was powerful watching that journey. And then kind of, I was investing, other mobile entrepreneurs would pay me and I would put some money in their companies and be part of their journeys. But, they, those were amazing companies to watch, amazing journeys to be part of. And it turns out that three of my buddies from college also had similar trajectories. They were angel investing, they were building companies, and one of my partners now, Vic, I remember emailed me back in, this is 12 years ago, 2008, probably 2009, saying, hey, Nihal, we're starting this mobile fund. We're looking for investors. We'd love for you to invest. And I responded to that man. And he went back to, have the intent and said, this fool says he's in. What does he mean by that? Does he mean he's writing a check, or what does he mean? And they asked me to clarify. I said, no, I want to be a partner.
Gotcha.
So I kind of forced myself into the partnership. The rest is history. We raised our first fund. It was a tiny fund, $1.6 million in 2010, because we were all part-time working on our existing startups. Yeah. 2012, we raised a little bit larger fund, $12.9 million.
Wow.
And in 2014, after I had left local response, we raised our first institutional fund, which is $55 million.
Wow. Okay.
Fund 4, $100 million, 2017, and now Fund 5 we just launched earlier this year in February 2021, which is $125 million. So we've been growing pretty fast, I guess, from 1.6 to 125. We could be growing a lot faster, but that's not the right KPI. In venture, I think for us, it's about focus. We're focusing on seed stage. We build companies pre-product market fit. That's the stage that we love. We don't want to enter at the Series A. We want to stay at seed. We'll do our pro rata, of course, to maintain ownership, through the Series B, but we're really laser focused on that seed stage pre-product market fit. And so we've been lucky to be part of some incredible companies. Obviously, personally, besides AdMob, there was Uber, through ENIAC, Attentive, Alloy, shareholders of Airbnb, seed investors in Outlets, that's public, seed investors in Box, that's going public next month. So, there's been some incredible rocket ships that we've been lucky to be a part of. But there's also been a lot of, much tougher slogs. And, there's a company that just raised their Series A last month. that we seeded in 2013.
Oh, wow.
It took 8 years to get to the A, right? These guys are now passing 10 million ARR and growing over 100% year over year. And they're going to do great. But, 3 pivots and 20 near-death experiences, right, is what it took to get here. So I think, that's probably part of our mojo. It's like our life experience of building startups and failing, building startups and succeeding. We realize how tough it is, like in the very early stages. And, I guess we're gluttons for pain and punishment because we love operating at that stage.
Yeah.
And so now the firm is 12 folks, same 4 partners, myself, Tim, Vic, and Hadley. We have incredible analysts and associates supporting us. We have incredible VP of content that came over from TechCrunch. We have an incredible operations team. And, we've been the same pace as we have been 12 years ago, which is 1 new investment per month.
Yep.
36 per fund. And so Fund 5 will take us through 2024 and we'll raise Fund 6. And hopefully we'll keep doing this for the rest of our lives.
Awesome. That's super cool. Wow. I'm still shocked by how quickly y'all grew in terms of the size of funds, right? That's absurd. I think it's probably the fastest one I've heard of to date. But anyways, so now there's just sort of a few more general sort of learning lesson-based questions that I have for you to sort of narrow down a lot of the ideas that we talked about today. So the first one is, we talked a lot about the various learning lessons you've had, but what is something that, one thing that you wish you had known when you were first starting out with any of the companies, any of your venture funds, et cetera, et cetera?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What is one thing you wish you had known? Just one thing that you could have changed or known when you were first starting out with any of your companies or with ENIAC?
Yeah, with ENIAC, it's going to take time, but it's not going to be 2 years. It's not going to be 4 years. But you might not get paid for 10 years. That your best companies are going to take that long, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think we didn't realize how long the time horizons are and how much longer they got because companies are being held private a lot longer than they used to be. So I think that's one thing that, I tell to a younger self. Another thing would be, that the team is incredibly important. And so, our team, like the 4 of us, have been friends since 1995, right? But we really only started working together, since 2009. So being friends doesn't automatically translate to an incredible professional relationship.
Sure.
And one thing that really changed our professional relationship was that 5 years ago, we got a coach to really work on how we work together professionally. And that was game-changing. And I think if I was to do this over, we probably get a coach a little bit earlier, but we're really glad that we did it at that point in time. Because, it is hard and challenging to basically transform from friends into really optimized partners. We're lucky that, so far we've been able to really harness each other's strengths and work together. But that's something I would have told myself to focus on earlier. I think coaching is incredibly important. And we recommend that for everybody, every entrepreneur, every founder that we invest in as well.
Gotcha. So just last question. This is just sort of for kicks. It's just one of those that I ask every person, but it's just going to be, what is your favorite number and what makes that your favorite number?
Favorite number?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I never really thought about that. I don't know. I used to think five was a good number for me. I think now it's probably 7. Not because it's extremely lucky in Chinese culture, but maybe that too. But because it is the day that my first son was born in February. And Sean is turning 7 next February, but he is an absolute, he was the best present my wife and I could ever ask for. And, much like our entrepreneurial journeys with lots of failure, there's a lot of failure to get to him. And, I know you're just a kid, but when you get to be an adult, it's not as easy as you think to have kids, especially as you get older. And so my wife has written about it, but anyway, it was a pretty long journey to get to him, and even longer to get to our second child. But the first one was a miracle. The second one was a miracle, but I think that's why I would say my favorite number today is 7.
Awesome. That's super cute. But anyways, thanks so much for answering that question. I think that brings us to a really nice close. So thanks so much again for taking the time to come on the podcast, Nihal.
Awesome, dude. Thanks for having me. Let me know when it's published and we will promote it.